South African trade unions and unions abroad agree that more needs to be done to help eliminate child labour. This as the second day of the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour is underway at the Inkosi Luthuli International Convention Centre in Durban. Let's get an update then. We cross to Unathi Batyashe, who is in Durban for us once again this afternoon. Of course, the second day, as we mentioned, focusing on how youth employment opportunities can mitigate child labour. But of course, you've also been looking at how South Africa is dealing with those staggering numbers of child labour. What is the latest, Unathi?
Thank you so much, Flo. And of course, delegates, it's been a long day for delegates today. They are discussing some of those issues that you've just mentioned. And of course, we did earlier speak to the DDG at the Department of Labour, also saying that education is one of the solutions that they are finding key to eliminating, or even to begin to start talking about eliminating child labour by that target, that United Nations target of 2025. Of course, this is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. But I mean, a lot of conversations around looking at, social security, looking at education, youth employment, as you've mentioned, as just some of those solutions, to start getting the ball rolling. Of course, touching a little bit of around the last conference that took place in 2017 in Argentina. Yesterday, I interviewed a gentleman who basically said that, the solutions are there. We know what the root causes of child labour are. And so the time now is really for action, essentially. And of course, I'm talking about Nobel Peace Laureate of 2014, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi. In fact, I spoke to him yesterday, and just take a listen to what he says about how we can start to eliminate child poverty.
It's very unfortunate that this increase has happened before the pandemic. If we add the pandemic situation, then additionally 46 million children globally are going to join the workforce, and that is unacceptable. So no one can hide behind the wall of excuses or any kind of reasoning because it was before pandemic. So it seems that we have deprioritized the issues of child labor and the most marginalized and vulnerable children in the world. Perhaps we have not been able to invest enough on the protection, health, education of children, or combination of these factors. We have lessened the political will, perhaps weakened the social mobilization and movement which can demand and hold the governments accountable. So I think we have been failing on various fronts, and failing our children, particularly failing Africa's children, is failing the future of humankind, failing Nelson Mandela, failing Gandhi. We cannot afford to do it. So we have to take bold, innovative and urgent actions because they are all our children. Nobody can live in silos saying that we are good enough in America or in Europe or in any of the richer country until unless the children are left. If the children are left out or left behind, we cannot make any global progress towards peace and sustainability.
Of course, that was Nobel Peace Laureate of 2014, Mr. Kailash Satyarthi. And I did talk about child poverty. In fact, I was talking about eliminating child labour. And of course, we know that poverty is one of the key drivers of child labour. But, just to get an understanding in terms of what was discussed today, and just following on what we've just heard in that clip about it's time now for action and very little time actually needed to be discussing things that we already know and are aware of. I'm now joined by the International Labour Organization's senior specialist on the fundamentals, principles and rights at work, Bharati Flug, and of course she is representing the ILO in Bangkok. Thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show. Of course, it's been a long day for delegates today, and as we've heard, from that impassioned plea by the Nobel Peace Laureate of 2014, it is now time to act. There is some kind of political will we've seen, but action is needed when we begin to start even talking about eliminating child labor.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that's really one of the key messages that we've had yesterday and today, that we've got many decades of experience now on child labor. The ILO has worked on it for the last 25 plus years, and we know what works in certain contexts and in certain regions. And of course it differs from country to country, from town to town at times, but overall we know that education is key, and that came out again and again, and not combining education with work. But that it needs to be full-time education. Children need to be able to benefit from their education. Children need to be able to actually have time to do their homework, not work at night and go to school when they're tired, but benefit from their education, have a right to the childhood, of course. Another important message that came through was agriculture. We know that the largest number of children are in agriculture. We were very happy the EU actually today announced a significant funding for fighting child labor in agriculture specifically. So that is really targeting one of the sectors where we know most of the children are. That links to child labor in rural areas. It links to the informal sector, which is, of course, key. And I think another important message was that of political will. Political will, and now putting programs and action behind that. So looking at but political will also in terms of, it's very clear that it's not one ministry that can do it on its own. So it's very clear it is not just the Ministry of Labour in different countries that is responsible for the elimination of child labour. It really is a combined effort. It's a combined effort across ministries. It's a combined effort across a spectrum of partners. We do need the employers and the workers with us, of course. We need media. We need academia. We need to have up-to-date research. Without the latest numbers at national level, it's very difficult to plan and to develop policies at national level. We need to know where those children are and what they're doing.
And another thing, we also need communities to start playing their role as well, which something that came out very strongly. I'd like us to now look at your title, Fundamentals and Principles and Rights at Work. I mean, that is quite an extensive title, and you specifically looking at Asia. Now, you mentioned the agriculture sector. In fact, of the 165 million child laborers, we know that around 70% of them are in that agricultural sector. And in Africa, in fact, that number is even greater. It's around 80%. How is the situation in Asia like? We've seen the increase of child labor across the board, but we know that in some countries and in some continents, there are pockets of success.
Yes, there are. So first of all, the title, the Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work. For the ILO, this is really core. When it comes to the ILO, we have 4 fundamental principles and rights at work, and one of those is the right to be free of child labor, the right to be free of forced labor, that there should be no discrimination at work, and then the 4th one is the right to freedom of association and collective bargaining. And this is, of course, where the element of decent work comes in also. Adults need to be able to have decent work so that their children do not have to go into child labor, as putting it rather simply, of course. Now, looking at Asia, I'm based in Bangkok, so I cover East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. And in general, Asia and the Pacific has been one of the regions where we have continued to see a decline in the number of children in child labor. So the last estimates from 2016, we still had around 69 million children in child labor. And now with the latest estimates last year, we've come down to almost to 48 point something million children in child labor. So there has been a steady decrease, and we're very happy about that. I think it is this combination of willingness to work at country level. There has, of course, been economic development in that region as well, which has helped. And there has been a lot of awareness raising. And I think what has made a big difference also is work at national level, but also at regional level. So, for example, we have ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, that have developed a regional plan on the elimination of child labor. So the issue is being tackled at different levels. We also have a number of pathfinder countries under Alliance 8.7 that are very active. Vietnam, for example, Fiji, Nepal, small and big countries that are taking their role very seriously in terms of sharing good practices, in terms of moving that little bit faster and experimenting a bit.
And you mentioned these successes under the ambit of Alliance 8.7, which really was adopted after the conference in Argentina in 2017. Now we know with this conference, at the end of the conference, delegates will then adopt a Durban call to action. What do these, documents or pledges that you make, do for an improvement perspective, where we start to see the change, where we propel countries to start working towards, eliminating child labor, which is very important and which is imminent. I mean, it's 2025.
Yes. It's
so
around the corner.
How important is it that at the end of this conference, there is some form of document that holds countries to account and to work towards a certain goal?
It's crucial. It really is crucial. And if you look at some of the previous conferences, Argentina in particular, there was the Buenos Aires Declaration, but we also had on the last day of the conference a number of over 90 countries and organizations that actually made pledges on what it is that they wanted to do in the next 4 years. And that was very important because we followed up on it. And countries were proud to report on what they had done or not. So it is really crucial that the Durban call to action, which is, and I think that is what is also unique about South Africa hosting the conference, they made it very clear to us that we want something tangible to come out of this conference, not just another declaration, but something that makes countries monitor what is happening, something that makes countries responsible, and in a way you have to live up to your declarations.
Bharati, I'm afraid that's where we have to leave it for now. But thank you so much. I mean, we could talk forever about this. But Flo, essentially, the day is almost done here. So day 2 of the conference, almost wrapping up with the second plenary expected to take place any moment now. So we're looking at around 5:30 for things to start settling down here at the Albert Luthuli conference facility. And of course, I mean, the conference ends on Friday, where we are expected to see delegates, adopting that Durban call to action.
All right, thanks very much, Unathi, in Durban for us at the 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour, giving us an update as to what's taking place at the conference and the conversations that are being had, as well as on the sidelines too, about the plight of child labourers.